This is Join Us in France, episode 508. 508. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we take a conversational journey through the beauty, culture, and flavors of France. In today's episode, I chat with Jennifer and Emma Jerzyk, who are a mother-daughter pair, as they share their delightful journey through the Rhône Valley between Tavel, which is a little north of Nîmes, and Dijon. And they also include Lyon, of course, the food capital of France. Their focus was AOC wines and gourmet cuisine, and they had some amazing experiences. This episode is a treat for food lovers, wine enthusiasts, and anyone who loves France. It offers a blend of personal stories and practical tips for anyone planning their own foodie adventure. The podcast is supported by donors and listeners who buy my tours and services, including my itinerary consult service, my GPS self-guided tours of Paris on the Voice Map app, or take a day trip with me around the Southwest in my electric car. You can browse all of that on my boutique, joinusinfrance.com/boutique. And remember that Patreon supporters get the episode ad-free, and as soon as it's ready, be like them. Follow the link in the show notes. For the magazine part of the podcast, and for my chat with the Jerzyk ladies today, I'll discuss all of the things we're discussing about in France the second half of August 2024, and I'll also tell you what is safe to bring when visiting Paris and what you should leave at home. Bonjour, Jennifer and Emma Jerzyk, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Hi, Annie. So happy to be here.
Lovely to talk to you. We're going to have a conversation about your trip that you took in April 2024, and you went up the Rhône Valley. You started in Tavel, and you ended in Lyon. What was the occasion for this mother-daughter trip?
Maybe I'll answer that. So my mom moved to France. It's been almost 2 years now. She moved to France upon retirement. She initially moved around a bunch, and now she lives in Montpellier. And so this was my first time coming over to France to visit her. And additionally, I love wine. I live in California and have a lot of wine here. And the Rhône River Valley is one of my favorite wine producing regions. And so I wanted to visit my mom in Montpellier and also go wine tasting.
Sounds wonderful. And Jennifer, you were okay with that plan, huh?
I was A-okay with that.
Okay. So tell me we're going to start with your favorite things and then work our way down. Perhaps you can tell us where you went first, because we know more or less where the area is, but give us some details about the area you visited.
Do you want to start, Mom?
So we started out in the AOC region of Tavel, which is unique in France in that it only produces rosé wines. And we were very familiar with one of the producers, Chateau Vedel, because we had drank a lot of their rosé in the United States. So I was really thrilled to get an appointment to visit with Céline Demoulin, who's the wife of the winemaker family. And she gave us just an absolutely extraordinary tour and tastings. And what we learned was that almost all of their production is exported to the United States. They are part of a distribution system that is owned by Kermit Lynch, who is based in California, or the company's based in California. And I think it was many, many years ago, they formed a relationship with Kermit Lynch. I can't even buy that wine here in the south of France unless I go directly to the vineyard, because all of it winds up in the U.S. So that was interesting.
Right. So how did you arrange this? You just knew the name and you called the winery?
I found them online and I sent emails to not just this one, but all of the wineries that we visited. And there were very few of them that I think you could have walked into. So it's always, I think, a good idea to try and send them an email or call in advance to get an appointment. And I just think, we got very personal attention from all of the places that we visited. That was a real pleasure.
Did you have to pay for any of these visits?
Yes, we did. In some cases, if we bought wine, they, said you don't need to pay. But there were some instances. Emma, maybe you want to talk about the tasting that we did at Ikigal, because those are very special wines. Do you want to go into a little detail there about that tasting?
Yeah. So, and also to go back to your earlier question, Annie, I had come up with a sort of short list of wineries that I wanted to visit because I love the Rhône River Valley. And so I've tasted a lot of different wines from around the Rhône, and particularly wines that are imported through Kermit Lynch, because I live in California and we drink a lot of imported wine. And so that was how we came up with the list of wineries. And then I sent it to my mom and had her call around and make appointments for me because she's got a little bit extra, more time than I do.
Mm-hmm.
We did a number of different tastings. I believe all of them we had to pay, or the payment was waived because we bought wine. But one of the more expensive tastings that we did was at Igigal, which is a very large, I would call it really more of a domain. They have multiple labels, but their flagship location is up in Côte-Rôtie, which is at the very northern tip of the Rhône River Valley. And they have a series of wines that are very highly priced, but are also very top quality. Syrahs, what's produced in the northern Rhône River Valley. And they're called the Lalas. They all start with La, and there are a couple different ones of sort of varying intensity, the amount of Syrah in them. And so we did a tasting there because those wines are very, very expensive. In order to taste those wines, it was a couple €100 just for the tasting. And then you could browse and shop and potentially buy any of the wines from the various Gigal labels.
So how expensive is this wine to purchase in France?
About €400 a bottle.
Geez, that's really expensive.
Yes.
And in the US, it's twice that?
Not quite. It's actually, because it's like such an expensive wine, it's actually typically pretty similar, maybe a little bit more expensive in the United States than it is in Europe and in France in particular, just because, it's already a really expensive wine.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I've ever purchased a bottle of wine that was €400. I don't think so.
I don't think you could be alone. I think that's the case for a lot of people. It's only really crazy people like me.
Okay.
Well, unfortunately, most of the wine in France doesn't cost that much.
No. I mean, to most French people, 40 is a fortune. So 400 is like, oh, no. But if it's a really special product, why not?
Yeah, I think it's like, are you using the wine as like utility, or, when you get into sort of the upper reaches of how expensive a bottle can be, it's really about, the artistic value of the bottle and of the domain itself. I mean, a lot of these domains and chateaus are owned by families, have been in families for generations. One of my favorite producers in the Northern Rhône is J.L. Chauve, which we weren't able to visit because they don't take visitors. But he, the current winemaker, whose name is Jean-Louis Chauve, I think he's like the 14th or 16th generation in that family who has been farming Syrah on the hill of Hermitage. And I think that's like a really special thing. And to me, that, is worth sort of a more expensive price tag to get to sort of participate. It feels like participating in history to me. And that's like, to me, that's really exciting.
Wow. Okay. I wish you were closer, because with the boot camp, we had a wine visit with a very small family-owned winery that sells wines, between 10 and 20 euros, really. And they have a Shiraz that I really like. It is on one of the more expensive ones, but it is lovely. And I want, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, is there really a big difference between a 20 euro bottle and a 400 euro bottle? There probably is. I'm just not a wine connoisseur.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. And I think for a lot of people, honestly, maybe not. For me, it's something, this is a field that I care about, and I really enjoy sort of being able to pick apart those differences. But I think at the end of the day, Wine is about enjoyment, and it's about whether you enjoy that bottle of wine. And to me, learning about wine, I think a lot of people feel like they have to learn about wine in order to enjoy it. And I think it's really the reverse. It's you enjoy the wine and you can learn about it if you want. And I think the learning about it helps you identify more and other wines that you might like. Like you might drink something and think, why do I love this so much? And you might learn about the production of the wine and learn certain things that you enjoy, the varietal, where it was produced, how it was produced. And that might help you identify other wines that you might like in the future. And I think that's sort of the value of learning about wine. But do you have to buy a 400 € bottle of wine in order to really enjoy wine? Absolutely not.
Right. So along your way there, I'm not sure if you stopped in Avignon, but Avignon has one of these wine stores where you can buy a shot of wine. So you walk in, they have all these, it's like a wine vending machine of sort. You get a credit card, you put some credits on there, you tap your credit card on the wine you want to try, and it'll debit a few euros. And it serves you, it pours you a little serving of wine just so you can taste it. And that's a very fun way to try more expensive wines, I think, and side by side with the cheap ones as well. Because even if you pay 12 euros for a small serving, that's fine. You just wanted to taste it. So I'm going to try and find the name of that place. And there's several places in France that do this. It's not unique to Avignon. I've done things like that in other places.
There's one in Dijon now. They have a new wine museum, but it's more than that. And they have a big tasting room where you can put money on a credit card and taste. They had hundreds of bottles you could taste.
Right. Do you really want to taste 100 wines? Probably not. That would not end well.
My mom and I had previously done a wine trip up to Oregon. Since I live in California, we'd done a road trip to Oregon to mostly taste a lot of Pinot Noir because that's a lot of what's grown in Oregon. But we had sort of made the mistake, or I should say I made the mistake of overscheduling us. And at one point, we had gone into 4 wineries in one day. And you really do get palate fatigue. It's really hard, actually, to taste wines at that point once you've had like 10 or 12. It's really, really difficult and frankly kind of unpleasant at that point. It kind of takes the enjoyment out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, This place in Avignon is called Le Vin Devant Soi, and they are not paying me to say that it's a nice place, but it is a nice place. And when I went, they were very friendly. They have people trying wines all the time. And it's really across, it's really close to the Palais des Papes. I'll put a link in the show notes as well for people who want to check that out. All right. So did you do just wine on this trip or did you do some other things?
We did mostly wine, but I would say we also did a lot of rest and relaxation. So maybe, Mom, would you want to talk about our time at Auberge de Cassagne and the spa?
The first night, we stopped in a small town just east of Avignon called Le Pontet. And I think it probably at one point was on the outskirts of Avignon, but now is kind of surrounded by the outskirts of Avignon. But a lovely, was it 4 stars, I think? 4 or 5-star Auberge de Cassagne. And I have to say, it was one of those like really fun surprises. We got there, they came right out to the car and greeted us, took our luggage in, brought us to the reception desk and said how happy they were that we were there. And gosh, had we had lunch? Because if not, they had a table for us in their lovely restaurant and we had not had lunch at that point. So they ushered us right in. We hadn't even gone up to our room. We had a lovely gourmet lunch. They had a sommelier, multiple courses. It was really, really nice. Then afterwards, they came and got us in the restaurant, took us up to our room. And the rooms were spacious. I mean, these were not, what I have experienced as sort of like the typical European hotels. Lots of room, a very large bathroom with a spa tub as well as the shower, a lovely little outdoor terrace. This would clearly be someplace you'd want to come, for a long weekend sort of R&R. And they had a full spa, so they had an indoor swimming pool, they had an outdoor pool, My daughters had gotten me a birthday gift of a spa treatment, which was absolutely extraordinary. And then we had a reservation to have dinner again in their restaurant in the evening. So just a real treat, fun. And honestly, by American standards, it was not as expensive, not as expensive as you spent in the United States, really. And owned by a family. And the owner was there greeting us, talking to us. Really, really lovely.
So I didn't ask you this, but you did this whole trip with a car, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we were.
Sorry, Emma, you were going to jump in.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think Auberge de Cassagne it's just such a lovely place to spend a few days. We only ended up spending one day there during the road trip, since obviously, it was a road trip. We were going from place to place. And so we only ended up staying 1 or maybe 2 nights in each place where we stayed. But I have already told my mom that I would like to come back again in early April, and I would like to spend a few days and nights at Auberge de Cassagne, because it was such a lovely place. I have to say, the beds were very comfortable. I'm very discerning when it comes to a nice mattress, and I loved the beds at Auberge de Cassagne. The spa facilities were beautiful. The lunch and the dinner that we had there was very, very nice. It was really a wonderful kind of retreat is how I would frame it. It's the kind of place where you kind of want to go there and you want to stay there and lounge and go to the spa and just relax all day. It's not the kind of place where you want to go there just to stay there overnight and then sort of during the day you're out doing a bunch of other things. It's kind of the place where you want to go and sort of plant yourself for a couple days to just kind of relax and get away.
That sounds wonderful. I like it. I will make a good note of that. That sounds great. All right.
I was just going to say also, so the next day after that, we did what I think for me was also kind of the peak of the trip. And that's a little bit of a double entendre, because we went to Maison Pique, which is a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant in the Rhône River Valley, owned and operated by Anne-Sophie Pique, which is she's one of, I think, only 3 female chefs who has 3 Michelin stars in the world. And so she's a very impressive lady. And everything was in full force when we were there. It was a really, really incredible dinner that we had there. And then on top of the restaurant itself, it's also an auberge. So once you're done with your wonderful 3 Michelin-star dinner, all you have to do is waddle upstairs and fall into bed, which I think is about what my mom and I did. And again, lovely accommodations, a beautiful setting, a real sort of retreat from urban life, a great chance to relax and enjoy our time there. And of course, if you're into fine dining and gourmet food, I mean, it was a real standout meal over from, my entire life. And I've gone to a lot of really great restaurants. I'm very lucky to say it was a really, really special experience to get to go there. And of course, Anne-Sophie came out during our dinner and, spoke to everyone at every table. And it was just such an honor to be able to meet her and to eat her amazing and wonderful food.
So describe how the meal goes, because some people who are listening to us have never done a Michelin, especially a 3 Michelin star restaurant. Describe the proceedings.
Yeah, so I think it's both sort of maybe stuffier, but even in some ways less stuffy than people expect. And so there aren't sort of hard rules per se about what you can do or what you can say or wear. There were some people who came into the restaurant and we were like, really? You're wearing a t-shirt here? But I think, in this day and age, really anyone can come in and people are dressed in different ways than you might expect them to be. But you come in, they lead you to your table and you sit down and the staff is just very attentive. So they'll come over and they'll explain how the meal is going to go and sort of explain the different points at which you're going to have choices. So, it's a prefix menu. So most of the menu has already been laid out for you. And there might be only a couple of courses where you really get to make a choice between a couple of different options. And then, of course, you have the option in terms of what you want to drink for the meal. And so one of the options is to do a beverage pairing. And in this case, it was, I would say, primarily a wine pairing, but included some non-wine beverages as well. So one of the courses was actually paired with a ceremonial matcha tea from Japan, so a green tea. And that was very interesting and tied in very well with the dish itself. And then some of the wines that they served were sort of not the dry table wines that you would expect. We had Madeira paired with one of our courses, which was a really sort of fun surprise, fun twist to have that with a dinner course, not as a dessert wine, not as an aperitif or anything. And so that was very cool. But of course, if you want to, you don't have to do the beverage pairing. You can buy a bottle of wine. I don't know how they would respond to if you brought a bottle of wine. I'm sure they would at the very least have a corkage fee, but we did not inquire, so I'm not sure. I'm sure that they have a full bar and you could order cocktails if you wanted to as well. And so they sort of present all of this to you, all of your choices in terms of what you want to do with the courses, what you want to do with your beverages. And so you make all those choices up front, right at the beginning, and then everything sort of happens to you for the rest of the dinner. They bring everything out, and it's all what's meant to be very structured and very precise. For example, my mom and I are both dining at the same table, of course. And so, they bring out both of our dishes at the same time. They place them on the table in front of us at exactly the same time. They might unveil it if they have something over the plate. They'll describe the whole gamut of everything that's on your plate, which is the appropriate time for all your oohs and ahs about everything that's included in the meal and in the dish. And then you just get to sit back and enjoy it, which of course is, I think, both my mom's and my favorite part. But yeah, you just get to enjoy it. And my mom and I, because we love, fine dining and food and wine, we'll comment on, what we like about the particular pairing or the dish itself. And there are sort of more like abstract things that you might find interesting about a dish. So for example, at Maison Pique for dessert, there were, of course, several dessert courses and options, but one of them was a truffle that was made to look like a peanut, a cacahuète in French. And you don't really see a lot of peanuts in France in general. Like in general, peanuts are kind of an American thing. And so that was it was sort of bucking all the stereotypes to bring us a dessert that's like not only includes peanuts in it and includes peanut butter in it, but is actually in the shape of a peanut. To us, that's funny and interesting and like a play on what is considered fine dining and what is considered French. But again, that sort of more intellectual interest is there if you want it to be, if you're super into fine dining and all the stuff that goes with it, like my mom and I, but also the food is just downright delicious. It just really was a delicious dinner. We came away, I think, very satisfied. And like I said, we just sort of waddled upstairs and fell into bed and, woke up in this sort of like heavenly daze in the morning and had our coffee and relaxed before we took off for the day. And actually, when we got in our car in the morning, we got in the car, which, we had parked via valet. They park the car for you. They bring out the car, we get in, and we're, it's been a couple minutes. We're in the car. We're figuring out where we're going. We're pulling up Google Maps. And all of a sudden, I'm like, why are there these water bottles? And also there's pâtisserie. And they had left us little candies and like little water bottles in the car for us as a little treat. And it's those little really thoughtful touches like that really elevate the place and make it really, really special and a really memorable experience. So it was a fun stop.
What did you think, Jennifer? Were you also awed by this whole experience?
Yeah, sometimes I've heard people say, well, what's the difference between a 1 Michelin and a 2 Michelin and a 3? Well, this is the first and only time I have ever eaten a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant.
Mom, that is not true.
Okay, that's true.
The only time you've been to a 3 Michelin-star restaurant in France.
In France, qualified in France, which I do think there's a distinction of Michelin-starred restaurants in France versus outside of France. Anyway, it is a very special experience. And, like Emma said, if you enjoy fine dining, I think it's a special treat to try that.
Mhm. Yes. And the setting is always lovely. Nobody is rushing. You have plenty of staff. So, like you said, it's choreographed. They're going to bring you your two dishes exactly at the same time. So, it's not like you don't have the waiter showing up with a massive tray full of food that might or might not fall on you. This is like one person is tasked with presenting you this beautifully made piece of food, and it's great. And usually it takes a good 2 hours to complete the meal, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a whole evening activity. Do not make up plans.
We're actually there, I think, close to 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't feel like that long because there's just always something happening.
Yeah. And the setting is always important. I mean, like they have to have a beautiful room. Very often it's a beautiful garden as well. You know, it has to look fancy and taste fancy, and they will not serve anything that a very picky chef doesn't consider to be, it's ready. It's good to go.
Yeah. And so there is like a beautiful garden right off of the restaurant. So the restaurant is connected to the hotel part of the building. And then there's Maison Peak, which is the 3 Michelin star sort of top restaurant, eponymous restaurant for Anne-Sophie Pic. And then there was also another restaurant that was a little bit more, not a 3 Michelin star restaurant. Still a very, very nice restaurant. We did not get a chance to try it. But if you were staying there for multiple nights, you could go there. You don't have to eat at the 3 Michelin star restaurant every night. And then there was that beautiful garden alongside the restaurant itself. And actually, they seated me and my mom at a table. It was like a little funny when we first sat down. They seated us at a table and we were both sitting on the same side of the table, which I always find like a bit awkward because you're sort of like turning to, be able to talk to them. And, it's obviously a little bit nicer to just be across the table from somebody when you're talking to them. But it was so that they sat us that way so that we could have a view of the garden. So we were actually looking out the window into the garden. And so we had that view over the course of the evening and, of course, the sunset. And so it went from sort of late afternoon and evening into the night. And you could sort of walk out to the garden if you ever needed a breather. It's a lot of courses. So a couple of people, went out there, particularly if you need a cigarette, you can go out to the garden. And then, of course, it was great to be seated that way for people watching. You could sort of see other tables and see what they were doing, if they ordered a bottle of wine or did the beverage pairing, which stage of the dinner were they at, and, all that people watching is always very fun in a restaurant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to another experience of yours. Oh, there's so many here. Go ahead. You can think of a good one to talk about, Jennifer.
These trips, where you sort of have an idea of what you want to do and you plan them yourself. You can make a lot of plans, but sometimes it's the things that happen during the trip that you didn't plan on at all that wind up being extremely memorable. And I'll just give one example here. We did a tasting. We stopped in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which is very well known, obviously, for its wines. And we stopped in the Caron family cave tasting room. I don't think we would have I did call ahead. I don't think we needed an appointment, but it turned out the young lady working in their tasting room was an American who's married to a French fellow. And she had done a course in wine and so was, well trained to do tastings. We got to taste some amazing Caron family wines. They are also a huge producer in France and export a lot of their wines to the United States, so pretty easy to find. And then we said, oh gosh, we don't have any plans for lunch. She said, oh, just take a walk up the hill behind the church and there's a restaurant up there.
It was a pretty steep walk. Fair warning. There were a lot of stairs involved.
About 10, maybe 15 minutes, and we weren't even going very fast. Well, we got up to the top, and this was the restaurant Le Verger du Pape, which I think means the fruitery, the fruit.
Yeah, verger is a place where you grow fruit.
It used to be the orchard for the popes, I guess. And so now converted into this lovely restaurant. They seated us immediately, and we had a beautiful view out over the Rhône Valley. We could see the Rhône River. The food was absolutely wonderful. There was another group. Were they Americans? Some of them were
They were Canadian.
Canadians. And they were debating over, should we get the cheese course or should we not? I said, you're in France, for heaven's sakes. Yes, get the cheese course.
Yeah.
How many times do you do this in this absolutely beautiful location? So there are those just wonderful little surprises that happen when you're traveling, and they're very memorable.
Yeah. A local recommendation for someone who lives there is very important. Always ask what's your hotel, whoever is you're interacting with, if they have a recommendation, because they probably know exactly where they would go.
The other kind of stumbled onto was that there is the Valrhona Chocolate Museum, and I think the factory might have been behind it, also alongside the Rhône River. Some people aren't as familiar with Valrhona because they do a lot of commercial chocolate production. Emma, what are those little things called that chocolate?
Fèves. They look like little beans when they produce the chocolate, and you buy them in these big, like 5-10 pound bags, and they come in these little fèves. And so I think a lot of pastry and chocolate producers use Valrhona chocolate, but maybe not as many sort of home chefs are familiar. But it's a very, very high quality chocolate producer. And I had used their chocolate before for cooking or baking. And I had not realized that the reason it is called Valrhona is because it is in the valley, the Val of the Rhône River. And so I was like, all of a sudden, it was a moment where it all sort of came together for me.
Yeah.
That we were there. It's called Tan-l'Hermitage, is the town where the Cité du Chocolat is. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's why it's called Valrhona. But it was a really fun part of the trip. I think especially if you have kids, it's a really fun sort of sensory museum. You buy a ticket, and as you're going through all of the exhibits, all the exhibits sort of talk about different parts of the chocolate making process, different types of inputs, different variables that influence the taste of the chocolate in the end. And there are all these little dispensers around all of the exhibits. And so you scan your ticket and it dispenses a little square of chocolate for you that is and it's usually a chocolate that's sort of relevant to the topic that they're talking about. And so, the tickets were, I want to say they were, around 20 to 25 euros a piece for the tickets, or maybe it was 11. I can't remember how much.
I think it was more like 10, 11.
Yeah, I think it was 23 euros for both of us. So I think it was around 11 euros a piece. But as part of that, you get like 15 pieces of chocolate. And you're kind of like, even if I were just buying this chocolate, it would probably cost only a couple euros less than the price of the ticket. And then when you buy the ticket, also, you can go over to the Valrhona chocolate store, and I think you get 10 or 20% off as a discount having bought the ticket. And so I bought lots of little chocolates. They had I think they're called for Easter, but fishes. And so I had bought a bunch of those because they were on sale because it was just past Easter, I think, when we were there. And so I bought a bunch of those and brought them home for my work colleagues, which they really, really enjoy.
Yeah, like good. Yeah. Not every day that you get to eat a piece of chocolate that's in the shape of a fish. That's great. That's great. So it looks like you had lunch at a place called Les Épicurieux. So tell me about this.
Yeah, that was also a local recommendation. So just going back to the theme of always ask people, what their recommendation is. And so that, we had gone and done the tasting at Gigal, which is, up in Côte-Rôtie. And we had done the tasting and I bought a bottle of wine and we said, we're looking to get some lunch. Is there anything you guys would recommend? And they were like, oh yeah. They were like, it's the restaurant in town. And they were like, don't even drive there. It's 2 blocks away. They were like, just turn right out here. Walk until you get to a restaurant. That's the restaurant.
That's the one, yeah.
That's the one. But of course, being in Côte-Rôtie, of course, it's a restaurant/wine shop. And so We ended up buying a bottle of wine while we were there to have with our lunch because it's a French lunch, so we must have wine.
Of course.
And we're on vacation. Why not? And so we had a bottle of wine and just a lovely afternoon having lunch there. And they actually had this really fabulous dessert that I had never had before that was mint ice cream with chartreuse poured over it. And I was like, this is not a combination that I would have come up with.
Yeah.
But it tastes really good.
That's good. That's good. All right. So time is moving on fast. Are there more of these wine and dining things that you want to mention?
Yeah, the only other thing that I would love to say about the wine experience was my favorite. Like I said, my favorite producer is J.L. Shav, who does not take visitors. Although when we were at Gigal, we were speaking with some people who said, oh, if you find the right tour guide, they can get you in and, whatever. So we might be doing that next year. But it was a really special experience. We went to visit in Tonne-l'Hermitage, the producer, Paul Jaboulet-Anet, who that's also sort of a big chateau, tasted a bunch of wines.
Yeah, I remember seeing those in the U.S.
Yeah, readily available in the United States. And one of the wines that they produce, or I think they have a couple different Hermitage Syrahs, but they're really, well-known and most expensive wine is called La Chapelle. It's from the hill of Hermitage, and there is a chapel up towards the top of the hill, and the vineyards around it are referred to as La Chapelle. We went and did that tasting, and we were speaking with the host, and we said, well, can we visit the chapel? Like there were pictures of the chapel, like sort of around the tasting room. And we said, so can you get up there? Like, can we get up there? Is that okay? And he was like, oh yeah, you just drive up there. And he sort of showed us the way. And so we drove up. There were a number of people we saw along the way who were walking up. So if you're into hiking, you can totally, walk it if you wanted to. I would not want to. But if you're somebody who likes hiking, you might enjoy it. But I mean, it's just beautiful when you get up there. It is an unbelievable view of the Rhône River and the valley and the town of Tonne-l'Hermitage. And I mean, like I said, that feels really special to me. The Hill of Hermitage has been there for so long. It's been used as a wine producing area. They've produced Syrah specifically on that hill for centuries. And I just think it's living history. It's so exciting to get to be there and feel like you're a part of it. I sort of liken it to for me, it was like a religious experience to get to go there and be there in person. And so that was a really, really special moment for me, even though it was kind of like you drive up there and you sort of walk around, you get to see the chapel and see the vineyards and there's a bench and it's sort of, you kind of just stand there. There's not anything to do, but I found it really, really special. And it was a really, really great moment in the trip.
Mm-hmm. So, Jennifer, since you live in France, do you eat like that every day?
No, I do not. It was very much a special trip. We were kind of informally celebrating both of our birthdays, I guess, this year. We'll use that excuse anyway.
Yes.
It was really, this is, like I said, the first time I went to go visit my mom since she's moved there. And so I think for that occasion, we were, ready to make it a special trip.
Mm-hmm. So since you drove, did you run into any problems with the drive or the rental or anything like that?
No, I rented the car through Europa Car. We wound up getting an automatic, which, I mean, I know how to drive a stick shift, but so that was kind of just made it that much easier. We were on some toll roads part of the time, and that was pretty easy to, you go through the toll booth and you pay with your credit card. We gassed it up before we returned it. To me, GPS just makes all the difference because it's exactly where to go. And it works, for me, it works really well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It worked really well, except for one winery or our tasting room. It was one tasting room that was marked incorrectly on Google Maps. Like it said it was in one place and it was actually 2 miles down the road in the other direction. And so that was a bit confusing at one point, but we just called the winery and they were like, yep, we know where you are. They were like, this keeps happening.
Well, they could just fix their location in Google Maps.
You would think.
Yeah, they're clearly better at making wine than doing a website,
Yeah.
which figures, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Did you learn anything about France on this trip?
Ooh. Oh, good question. I would say I learned more details about sort of the Rhône River Valley and what is involved in the winemaking and what is allowed. You know, there's a lot of rules in France around what grape varietals are allowed to be grown and blended into wines from different areas. And so one of the things that I had sort of heard about prior to the trip, but got to sort of experience and hear about more up close is that in some of the northern Rhône, you know, they produce Syrah as their red wine, but they will also blend in some Viognier, which is a grape varietal that is typically used for white wine production, particularly in the appellation of Condrieu. And so it's usually you'll have a Viognier, it's a single varietal white wine that's sort of very aromatic and bold, but they will actually blend that into the red Syrah wine up to, I believe, 20% in some areas of Côte Rôtie. And it just helps sort of like lift the Syrah. If you're a big Syrah drinker, you might know, you know, some Syrahs are on the lighter side, but a lot of them can tend to be, you know, a bit bolder, more tannic, and sometimes it gets a little sort of stodgy almost. And so they'll blend in Viognier as a way to sort of lift it. And hearing about that was really interesting to me. Also, there's an appellation up in the northern Rhône that I had actually never heard of because it's an appellation where there is only one domain. And they produce all of the wine from that appellation. And I think it's very difficult to find in the United States, very difficult to find in general, and particularly difficult to find in the United States. And so this was an appellation that I had just straight up never heard of before actually getting to France.
That's interesting, yeah. And of course, the price of wine in France in general is a lot less expensive than in the US.
Especially compared to the quality. You can technically get less expensive wines, or, you know, you can get wines that are similarly inexpensive to the wines in France in the United States, but they're going to be a lot worse than the wines that you're buying in France for, you know, €5. You can spend $5 on a bottle of wine in the United States, but it's going to not be very good. But you can spend €5 on a bottle of wine in France, and it can be an actually really, really good bottle of wine.
Yeah. Is there something that you did that you didn't really enjoy that you would not recommend?
Good question.
In the document, you talk about a Bouchon restaurant.
Oh, yeah. The Bouchon restaurant in Lyon is a very like classic Bouchon. You know, Lyon is sort of known for particular dishes, and it's a lot of often very sort of like heavy sort of countryside food. Cream and pork, the two pillars of Lyonnaise cuisine, and maybe like potatoes or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of that sort of heavy food, but eaten in a very uplifting environment. So we, you know, went to this, it's a very classic Bouchon in Lyon, the Café de Fédération. It's definitely like a very touristy experience. It's not, I think, something that people in Lyon are probably doing every day. But for me, you know, I had told my mom before we went there, you know, I wanted to go someplace and get sort of the classic Lyon experience. And so we went to this Bouchon, and it ended up being kind of a blast. And there was an accordion player who played for a lot of our dinner, and people were singing, and it ended up being a very fun night.
Yeah. I can't talk smack of accordion. I put it at the beginning of every show. But if there is an accordion, it's probably touristy.
It's true. I did a tour in Lyon previously, or, you know, prior to that dinner that I personally was not a huge fan of. I've done a lot of food tours in a lot of different cities, and this one, it was a bit odd. We sort of went to each location, and the tour guide was like, here's the food. We didn't really like get a description of like who made this and why and what's their story and like why is this important to Lyon and sort of all the stuff like that, and a lot of description. And then also we ended up eating a lot of very, I would say, not traditional Lyonnaise food. We had the brioche pralinée, which is
yes.
a traditional Lyon pastry. It's brioche.
Love that.
Yeah, like this like pink praline.
Is there a pralus in Lyon as well? Probably.
Oh, Pralus.
Pralus. He has a couple of stores in Paris. One is included in my self-guided food tour in Paris. But I don't know if he has any in Lyon.
Yeah. That might have been where we went. But yeah, we went to a bakery and got the brioche praline. But then we went to a place and got pizza. That's definitely not French, definitely very much Italian. And it was, the tour guide, she did tell us, okay, this is, has special Italian ingredients, special olive oil, all of that stuff. Then we went to a place that had empanadas, which again, they were delicious. Like, no qualms with the deliciousness of the food, but it was just not really, actually about Lyon, it felt like. And there wasn't a lot of sort of description as to, what's the connection here? What's the historical context of this food? Why is this important? Who's making this? Why do they care about it? All the stuff you want to know on a tour.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we made a couple stops, but it was, I would say that was not my favorite.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Jennifer and Emma, you have been wonderful, very animated, very excited about that trip. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who love wines and gourmet dining who will be salivating the whole time they listen. That's about what I was doing. So I'm like, oh, now I got to go have some dinner. But I'm not going to fix anything that fancy because every day, in France, we don't eat that fancy, honestly, But
I think my mom's favorite thing is the flan from Carrefour, right?
The one from Carrefour is particularly good?
Well, it's good. And it's very accessible.
Definitely, yes. I have to go to Carrefour to get a few things for our trip tomorrow. So perhaps I'll check out the flan. We'll see. Thank you very much, ladies. You have been wonderful to talk to. And hopefully you'll come back to France and try more wonderful wines. There's some very good wines in the Southwest as well. So come west. We have all the good yet cheap wine here.
That is very true. You have wonderful wines in the Southwest.
Yeah. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Yeah. Okay.
Au revoir.
Again, I want to thank my patrons for giving back and supporting the show. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing that. You can see them at patreon.com/joinus, Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes. A special shout out this week to my new Join Us in France champions, Tamara Clahen and Chuck Watson. Would you join them too? You can do that for as little as $2 a month, although the rewards you get for a little more than that are totally worth it as well. Go to patreon.com/join us, and to support Elise, go to patreon.com/Elise Art, ELYSART. My thanks also to Margaret Sapp for her one-time donation made using any green button on joinusinfrance.com that says, Tip your guide. I think listeners get great tips from this podcast, and I appreciate it when you reciprocate, so thank you. You can discover Paris at your own pace with my voice map self-guided GPS tours, whether you're strolling through historic neighborhoods, admiring iconic landmarks, or uncovering hidden gems. These tours are designed to be your perfect companion. Just download the Voice Map app, which is free, pick a tour, and let my narration guide you through the city of light. You'll get local insights, fascinating stories, and practical tips, all the while walking in the footsteps of history. Perfect for both first-time visitors and seasoned travelers. And if you buy those tours directly from me, you'll get the listener discount. You can check them out and buy tour codes at a discount at joinusinfrance.com/boutique. I'm going to read some reviews of these tours because I've written several of them. The first one is for my Île de la Cité tour. This person wrote, fantastic tour, well worth it, and gained knowledge about the Île de la Cité. Another one on my Montmartre tour. I love that Annie starts in the uncrowded parts of Montmartre before she takes us into the thick of things of the tourist section. It turns out that our Airbnb was just a few steps away from 4 different landmarks, so it was cool. Also, that Annie strategic and planned the route so that they were never more than 12 stair steps involved in any of the flight of stairs. That's an accomplishment for Montmartre. Well done. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I don't have very good knees, and so I don't really like to take 50 steps at a time. And so I've planned the tour out so that, it's Montmartre, you have to take steps. But you can do it a little bit at a time and end at the top without having to, go through that frightening long set of, stairs. About my Latin Quarter tour, this was a great tour like the Montmartre or the Marais tour. However, not like Ile de la Cité tour that I have also purchased and that was crashing all the time and I was not able to do yet. I will repeat it tonight with the hope that it will work better. Yeah, sometimes, phones are a bit funny. These apps are pretty easy to use, but if it keeps crashing, I think, turn it off and on, it will probably work better. And with these tours, any of these tours that you've bought, you can delete the tour and download it again. And once you've bought it, you can delete it and get it back at any time. So do that. Try that. Thank you, Carolyn and Ernest Fuller, for your one-time donation. Carolyn wrote, Annie, we enjoyed your podcast so much because of your podcast about the Mayenne. We met Sarah Smith, who was my guest talking about the Mayenne, and now we see them whenever we stay near Laval. I'm delighted that the podcast brought you together. That's wonderful. Thank you for letting me know, and thank you for your tip. If you're planning a trip to France and have questions that did not get answered in an episode of the podcast, you can hire me to be your itinerary consultant. I offer 2 levels of itinerary consultations, the Bonjour service and the VIP service. It's all explained at joinusinfrance.com/boutique. Someone asked on the Facebook group if she should bring her designer bag to Paris. She got many answers, and the answers were all over the place, as is always the case on Facebook. If you are confused about something, just ask on Facebook, and you'll get so many different answers. You're not going to know what to do with any of them. But I don't answer every question on the group. There's too many. But this is one where I said, my recommendation is to leave it at home and use it when you go to the country club at home. That's where you might want to show off your beautiful jewels, your watches, your purses. Paris is a big city with big city thugs, sometimes in organized bands that roam the city looking for tourists and easy marks. Go to Paris with the mindset that someone will try to rob you and have nothing that's difficult to replace on your person. The most expensive thing you should have on your person is your cell phone. Cell phones make life easier, they make travel easier, you'll need it, but you don't want to mind your Rolex, your Kelly purse, and all of the other nice things that you own, as well as your phone. Just in Paris or in any big city in France, use a cheap crossbody bag with zippers and only take one credit card and something like a little bit of cash, 40 euros or something. Keep your phone either in your hand or zipped up in your purse. Have ID other than your passport. Perhaps bring your driver's license, which, if somebody takes it, okay, you can replace it. It's not the end of the world. Perhaps have a passport card, which you can order when you get your new passport. Travel light, my friends. That's the name of the game. This week, we learned that Alain Delon passed away at age 88. I'm sure you know who he was, most of you, but for the young listeners, Alain Delon was a very handsome actor who played some iconic roles in French movies. His later years were difficult because his kids are fighting over the money, and I'm sure the fights will just get worse. He had some really backward ideas that were prevalent in the 60s and 70s in France. For example, he had put in his will that his beloved Malinois dog, he always had a Malinois, he loved the breed, should be euthanized because he would never have a good life without him. Obviously, no sane veterinarian will euthanize a healthy dog, and you can't do that in France. So it's not going to happen, and dogs can have a good life even after their owner passes so long as they are with competent, loving people. But he was kind of obsessed with this idea. He had mentioned it in several interviews, and usually the interviewers would say, really? Isn't that a bit extreme? And he would just repeat that, no, the dog would never be the same without me. Oh boy, dude, get over yourself. Anyway, so yes, the passing of a legend, I guess. Emmanuel Macron will be looking to announce the new cabinet that will rule France in early September. The Olympics gave us a nice breather, but the political bickering will resume any time now. I may just have to going back to ignoring most of that. Besides voting, of course, I never skip a vote, okay? Polish writer Katarina, I can't say this word, Niewadioma, I'm not sure. Wonderful person that she is. She won the Women's Tour de France 2024. And she didn't get a lot of headlines because of the Olympics, but it was a really tight race. She was 4 seconds ahead of Demi Vollering, who won last year. Congratulations to both of them and to all the riders. The Women's Tour de France deserves more attention. It's a fantastic event. My husband, daughter, and her fiancé are getting ready to set off to Paris in the mighty MG electric car. And I was a little worried about the luggage, because it doesn't have the biggest trunk in the world, but it all fit. Our 4 carry-on pieces and a couple of backpacks fit. We tried. And now I have to find a dog sitter because somehow I had failed to ask my usual dog sitter and she's not sure she can do it. So yeah, it's so stressful when you travel. You know, usually I'm really well organized. I plan these things weeks in advance. I know exactly what's going to happen. Yeah, this time, oof. But I'm sure it'll work out. I have several plan B. My thanks to podcast editors Anne and Christian Codovan, who produced the transcripts. Next week on the podcast, an episode with Elise about spending 2 days in Marseille and having a fabulous time. She's been visiting Marseille once a year, more or less, staying with a friend, and she explains all the things that she enjoyed on her latest trip. She went out of her way to try some of the things she had never seen before, and there's some very cool things in Marseille, as you will see. Thank you for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2024 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.